The human Senate chamber was bigger than any government building in the old galaxy. 200 senators sat in curved rows, their faces showing the weight of the decision before them. President Alex Carter stood at the center podium while the alien delegation waited in a special viewing area. "We have heard the request from our former galaxy," Alex announced to the assembled senators. "They ask us to return and fight an enemy that threatens all life. The question before us is simple. Do we risk human lives for people who drove us away?" Senator Paul Grant rose from his seat. He was one of the original advocates for leaving the galaxy, and his voice carried the pain of old wounds. "Madam President, these same aliens called us warmongers when we fought their battles. They said we were too violent, too aggressive. They took our protection and gave us nothing but criticism in return." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Many senators remembered the years of thankless service, the human soldiers, who died fighting other people's wars, the dismissive treatment at council meetings. "Why should our children die for their mistakes?" Paul continued. "They made their choice when they decided they didn't need us. Let them face the consequences." Dr. Amy Chen stood to respond. She was Dr. Rachel Stone's successor, the leading expert on galactic affairs. "Senator Grant, I understand your anger. I shared it for many years. But if we let an entire galaxy die out of spite, what does that make us?" She gestured toward the viewing area where the alien delegates sat. "Look at them. They traveled across empty space for months just to ask for our help. They're swallowing their pride and admitting they were wrong. That takes courage." "It takes desperation," Paul shot back. "Where was their courage when we asked for equal voting rights? Where was their wisdom when Dr. Stone warned them about external threats?" Fleet Admiral Beth Stone took the floor next. As Dr. Rachel Stone's daughter, her words carried special weight. "My mother spent her life trying to prepare the galaxy for threats like the Void Swarm. She knew this day would come. She also knew that humanity's greatest strength isn't our weapons or our tactics. It's our refusal to abandon those who need help, even when they don't deserve it." Senator Maria Lopez from the outer colonies stood up. "Admiral Stone speaks well, but it's easy to be generous with other people's lives. My district lost 2,000. Young people in the Rim Wars. How do I tell their families that we're going back to fight for the same species that got them killed?" The debate continued for hours. Arguments flew back and forth across the chamber. Some senators spoke of humanity's duty to protect the innocent. Others demanded justice for decades of mistreatment. The vote was too close to call. In the viewing area, Zara Unit 1 watched the proceedings with growing dread. Through her ship's communication system, she received updates from the home galaxy. The Void Swarm had broken through the last major defense line. They would reach the core worlds within days. "Dr. Velton," she whispered to her companion. "Can you understand what they're saying?" The crystal scientist had been monitoring human information networks throughout the debate. "They're genuinely torn. Half want to help us, half want us to face the consequences of our actions. The vote could go either way." President Carter called for order as the debate reached its peak. "Before we vote, I want to share something with the Senate. This morning, I received a message from Captain Lisa Harper. A holographic image appeared above the podium. It showed an older human woman with gray hair and tired eyes, wearing the uniform of the Human Deep Space Service. "Hello, fellow humans," Lisa's recorded voice said. "Many of you know me as the captain of the Resilient, one of the last ships to leave galactic space 50 years ago. I've been monitoring the situation in our former galaxy, and I want to tell you what I see." The Senate fell silent as Lisa continued. "I see children dying on worlds I once protected. I see species that never hurt anyone being consumed by monsters they can't fight. Yes, their governments wronged us. Yes, we have every right to stay away. But those children didn't vote against us. Those innocent people didn't drive us away." Her image looked directly into the camera. "We left because we were tired of being taken for granted. But if we stay away while innocents die, We become something we're not. We become the kind of people who abandon those in need. Is that who we want to be? The message ended, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. Senator Paul Grant looked around at his colleagues, seeing his own doubts reflected in their faces. "Vote," President Carter called. The electronic voting began. Green lights for yes, red lights for no. The tally board showed the count rising slowly. 99 yes, 98 no. The numbers climbed as more senators voted. 112 yes, 110 no. In the end, the decision passed by exactly 12 votes. 106 in favor of returning, 94 against. "The motion carries," President Carter announced. "Humanity will return to defend our former galaxy." Admiral Beth Stone wasted no time implementing the decision. Within hours, the human defense fleet began preparing for the journey home. Their ships were marvels of advanced technology, built during 50 years of isolation and innovation. Captain Dan Rivers commanded the lead squadron as they entered fold space, a technology that allowed instant travel across vast distances. His ship, the Freedom's Edge, carried quantum disruption weapons specifically designed to fight hive mind entities. "Fleet status report," Dan requested as they approached the galactic rim. "All ships ready for combat," replied his tactical officer. "Quantum field generators online. Adaptive targeting systems active. We're ready to show the galaxy what humans learned in exile." The human fleet emerged from fold space just as the void swarm reached the galactic core. The timing couldn't have been more dramatic. Alien defensive fleets were falling back in complete disorder, their weapons useless against an enemy that adapted to every attack. Admiral Nick 7, commanding the last organized resistance, watched in amazement as human ships appeared from nowhere. The vessels moved with fluid grace, their formations shifting in patterns no other species could achieve. "This is Admiral Beth Stone of the Human Defense Fleet," came the transmission that the galaxy had waited 50 years to hear. "All Allied ships, fall back to safe distance. We'll take it from here." Captain Dan Rivers led the first attack against the swarm. But unlike every previous battle, the humans didn't just fire weapons and hope for the best. They used quantum disruption fields that interfered with the swarm's hive mind communication. The effect was immediate and devastating. Swarm entities that had moved in perfect coordination suddenly became confused and disorganized. They couldn't adapt to human tactics because they couldn't communicate with each other. "All squadrons implement Rachel Stone Protocol 7, Beth commanded. It was a battle plan developed by her mother decades earlier, specifically designed for fighting collective consciousness enemies. Human ships danced through space with impossible precision, their movements guided by artificial intelligence systems that thought like humans, but reacted faster than any biological mind. They targeted swarm command nodes with surgical strikes, while quantum fields prevented the entities from sharing information. Captain Jake Morrison led the final assault on the swarm's central mass. He was the son of the ambassador who had delivered humanity's departure speech 50 years earlier. Now he would help write the ending to that chapter of galactic history. "For everyone who didn't make it home," Jake said as his ship dove into the heart of the swarm. "For all the people we couldn't save." The Battle of the Galactic Core lasted 3 days. When it ended, the Void Swarm was trapped in quantum containment fields, cut off from each other and helpless. Human science had found a way to imprison them in pocket dimensions, where they could never threaten another galaxy. In the aftermath, representatives from every surviving species gathered aboard the human flagship Enterprise. This time, there would be no mistakes about humanity's place in galactic affairs. President Carter addressed the new Galactic Charter ceremony with words that would be remembered forever. "We came back not because you needed us, but because the universe is better when its children stand together. Let us never forget that lesson again." The galaxy had been saved, but more importantly, it had learned the true value of those willing to protect it. The stars shone brighter, knowing that humanity had come home. 6 months had passed since the last human ship disappeared from Council space. Senator Maria Rodriguez sat in her office on New Terra, the capital world of the human frontier republic, reading reports that made her stomach turn. The intelligence network that humans had quietly maintained was sending back disturbing news from their former home. Captain Steve Collins knocked on her door before entering. His weathered face looked grim as he carried a datapad filled with the latest information. "Ma'am, you're not going to like what I found." Maria looked up from her desk. The report spread before her painted a picture of a galaxy falling apart piece by piece. "How bad is it this time, Steve?" "Kepler Station fell 3 days ago," he said, setting the pad down. "The pirates hit it with everything they had. 27 ships from 4 different species, all working together for the first time in recorded history." Maria closed her eyes. Kepler Station had been home to 60,000 people, families, traders, researchers, all living under the protection that human patrols had provided for decades. Casualties? Unknown. The station went dark during the attack, but we're picking up slave ship signatures heading toward the outer rim black markets. The words hit Maria like a punch to the gut. Slavery had been nearly eliminated from this part of the galaxy thanks to human anti-trafficking efforts. Now it was coming back, and the people who had kicked humans out were paying the price. "What about the council response?" she asked, though she already suspected the answer. Steve shook his head. "There wasn't one. The nearest council fleet was 4 systems away, and they don't have fast response protocols like we did. By the time they got the distress signal and organized a rescue mission, it was too late." Maria walked to the window overlooking New Terra's capital city. Clean streets, peaceful citizens, thriving businesses. The humans had built something good here in the frontier, far from the politics and prejudice of council space. But she couldn't stop thinking about the people they'd left behind. "There's more," Steve continued. "The Altarian Federation and the Centauri Collective are at each other's throats again. Remember the mining rights dispute in the Vega system?" "The one Ambassador Johnson settled last year? That's the one." "Well, without human mediators, it's escalated into a full trade war. Both sides are placing blockades on each other's shipping. The Vegans are caught in the middle and taking heavy economic damage." Maria remembered Ambassador Patricia Johnson. Well, a patient woman who had spent 3 months shuttling between the Altarian and Centaurian leaders, finding a compromise that gave both sides what they needed while protecting Vegan interests. It had been delicate work, requiring someone who understood all 3 cultures and could speak their languages fluently. "The Vegans tried to mediate themselves," Steve added. "It lasted 2 days before the Altarian delegate walked out, claiming, 'The Vegans were biased toward the Centaurians.' And the council?" Ambassador Claxtor called for calm discussion and rational thought from his office on Zephyr Prime. The Drakmari delegate suggested solving the dispute through trial by combat. "The aquatic Neridans haven't attended a council session in 2 months because they can't breathe the air in the chambers anymore." Maria frowned. "What do you mean they can't breathe the air?" The atmospheric processors in Council Central were maintained by human technicians. Apparently nobody else knew how to calibrate them for all the different species' needs. The air mix has been slowly shifting toward what the Zephyrians prefer. It was almost laughable if it wasn't so tragic. Humans had been the ones who figured out how to create environments where dozens of different species could work together. They had been the translators, the mediators, the technicians who made multi-species cooperation possible. A young aide, Lieutenant Amy Watson, entered the office with another datapad. "Senator, we just received an encrypted message from Dr. Helen Murphy. She's asking for permission to respond to a medical emergency in council space." Maria knew Helen well. The brilliant doctor had run the Human Medical Corps, the rapid response team that had contained epidemics and treated natural disasters across the galaxy. "What kind of emergency?" "Plague outbreak on 3 Centaurian worlds." The death toll is climbing fast. Dr. Murphy says she has the cure. It's a variant of the red fever that human medics dealt with on Proxima Colony 5 years ago. And the Council's response? Amy looked uncomfortable. They're asking for help, but not officially. The request came through back channels from individual doctors and planetary governors. The Council itself hasn't acknowledged the crisis. Maria understood the politics. The Council couldn't officially ask humans for help, without admitting they had made a mistake in exiling them. But people were dying while politicians tried to save face. What's our official position? Amy asked. We help, Maria said without hesitation. Dr. Murphy has permission to send medical supplies and information to any Centaurian world that requests it. But she goes as a private citizen, not as a representative of the Human Frontier Republic. Amy nodded and left to send the message. Steve watched her go, then turned back to Maria. There's something else you need to know. Intelligence suggests that several minor species are planning to follow our example. You mean leaving the Council? More than that. The Tau Cetians, the Procyon Alliance, and at least 8 other species are forming their own confederation. They're calling it the Free Worlds Coalition, and they're using our departure as inspiration. Maria felt a mix of pride and worry. Pride that humanity's peaceful withdrawal had shown other species there was an alternative to Council rule. Worry about what would happen when those species tried to leave without the careful planning and preparation that humans had done. The problem is, Steve continued, they don't have our advantages. They don't have unified governments like we did. They don't have the military strength to defend themselves if the Council tries to stop them, and they definitely don't have Admiral Hayes's strategic mind. Maria knew he was right. Humanity had spent decades preparing for independence, building frontier colonies, developing new technologies, and creating a military doctrine that could defend scattered worlds. Most importantly, they had left peacefully, giving the Council no excuse to use force against them. When do you think they'll make their move? She asked. Soon. Maybe weeks. The Tau Cetians are already moving their government officials to hidden locations. The Procyon Alliance has been quietly building up their defense fleets. A soft chime indicated another message arriving. This time it was directly from the Frontier Defense Command. Maria read it quickly, her expression darkening with each line. What is it? Steve asked. Drakmari raiding parties have hit 6 different worlds in the past month, all former human protectorates. They're taking slaves, stealing resources, and destroying infrastructure. The local defense forces can't stop them. Steve was quiet for a moment. The Drakmari had always been aggressive, but human peacekeeping forces had kept them in check. Regular patrols, swift responses to aggression, and diplomatic pressure had contained their worst impulses. Now there was nothing stopping them from reverting to their old ways. The Council must be getting pressured to do something, he said. They are. But their response has been to send strongly worded messages condemning the raids. The Drakmari are laughing at them. Maria stood up and walked back to the window. In the distance, she could see the construction of new orbital platforms that would defend New Terra and the surrounding systems. Humanity was building something better here, something free from the corruption and politics of the old system. But the galaxy was burning, and the very people who had forced humans to leave were suffering the consequences. Steve, I want you to prepare a comprehensive report on the situation in Council space. Everything we know about the conflicts, the economic disruption, the security breakdown, present it to President Anderson. What are you thinking? Maria turned back to him, her expression serious. I'm thinking that sooner or later the Council is going to realize they made the biggest mistake in galactic history. And when they do, we need to be ready for whatever comes next. 1 year after humanity's exile, the galaxy erupted into chaos. General Rick Parker stood in the command center of Frontier Defense Station Alpha, watching real-time feeds from Council space as civilization crumbled before his eyes. The screens showed burning stations, refugee ships fleeing battles, and fleets engaged in open warfare where peace had reigned for generations. "Sir, we have another wave of refugees requesting asylum," reported Colonel Janet Foster, his second in command. 300 ships from the Cygnus sector. They're carrying nearly 2 million civilians." Rick nodded grimly. The refugee camps on the frontier worlds were already overcrowded with people fleeing the violence in council space. Humans had built good lives here, but they couldn't house half the galaxy. "What's their story?" he asked. "Drakmari invasion fleet. Hit their systems yesterday. 12 worlds fell in 6 hours. No warning, no demands, just pure conquest." Rick felt his jaw tighten. The Drakmari had always been the most aggressive species in the Council, but human peacekeepers had kept them contained for decades. Regular patrols along their borders, quick responses to any aggressive moves, and careful diplomacy had prevented exactly this kind of expansion. Now there was nothing stopping them. "The Council's response?" he asked, though he knew the answer would disappoint him. Emergency session called for next week. Ambassador Claxtor issued a statement condemning the unfortunate violence and calling for peaceful resolution. Rick turned away from the screens in disgust. Next week. While people died and worlds burned, the Council would spend days arguing about proper procedures and diplomatic protocols. It was exactly the kind of bureaucratic paralysis that had made human peacekeeping necessary in the first place. Dr. Helen Murphy entered the command center, her medical uniform stained with exhaustion. She had been working around the clock, treating refugees from the various conflicts erupting across council space. "General, I need to talk to you about the medical situation," she said, her voice heavy with fatigue. "How bad is it, Doc?" "Worse than you can imagine. The plague I treated on those Centaurian worlds has spread to 8 more systems. Without human rapid response teams, they can't contain it. The death toll is in the millions now." Rick had known Helen for years. She had been the head of the Human Medical Corps, the organization that had rushed to help whenever disease or disaster struck alien worlds. Her teams had saved countless lives, often arriving within hours of an emergency call. "There's more," Helen continued. "The Altarian-Centaurian trade war has created food shortages on 17 worlds. The supply chains that humans helped establish are completely broken. People are starting to starve." "Can we help?" Helen shook her head. "We're already stretched thin with the refugees. And the Council has made it clear that human aid would be considered interference in internal affairs. They want our help, but they won't ask for it officially." A new alert flashed on the main screen. Colonel Foster quickly pulled up the data. "Sir, we're getting reports of a major battle in the Vega system. The Altarian and Centaurian fleets have engaged each other directly." Rick watched the tactical display showing dozens of ships firing on each other near Vega Prime. The beautiful, blue-green world that humans had helped protect for generations was now caught in the crossfire of a war that should never have started. "Casualties?" he asked. "Both sides have lost at least 30 ships each. The battle is spreading toward the planet. The Vegan Defense Force is trying to stay neutral, but they're getting hit by stray fire." Rick remembered the Vegan people well. Peaceful farmers and artists who had never wanted any part in galactic politics. Humans had protected them from exactly this kind of violence, serving as a buffer between aggressive neighbors. Now those neighbors were fighting over their heads. Lieutenant Ben Carter rushed into the command center with an urgent message pad. "General, priority communication from Admiral Hayes. The situation just got worse." Rick read the message quickly, his expression darkening with each line. "The Free Worlds Coalition just declared independence from the Council. 12 species, 47 star systems." "That's good news, isn't it?" asked Colonel Foster. "More species following our example?" "Not like this," Rick replied grimly. "We spent decades preparing for independence. These species are doing it, in the middle of multiple crises, with no preparation, no unified command structure, and no plan for self-defense." As if summoned by his words, another alert appeared on the screens. The Tau Cetian homeworld was under attack by a combined Council enforcement fleet. Unlike humanity's peaceful departure, these species were fighting for their freedom, and the Council was fighting to keep them. Admiral Hayes wants a full threat assessment, Rick told his staff. How long before this chaos reaches our borders? Dr. Murphy looked up from her own reports. It already has. We're getting requests for medical aid from frontier worlds that aren't even part of the human republic. The violence is spreading faster than the Council can respond to it. Rick studied the galactic map on the main screen. Red markers showed active conflicts, yellow marked areas of civil unrest, and green indicated stable zones. There was very little green left in Council space. The Zephyrians are calling for order restoration protocols, Colonel Foster reported. Whatever that means. Rick knew exactly what it meant. He had seen the classified Council documents during humanity's time as peacekeepers. Order restoration protocols were emergency measures that gave the Council authority to use military force against member species to maintain stability. They're going to start using their military against their own people, he said quietly. The irony was bitter. The Council had accused humans of being too aggressive, too quick to use force. But when faced with the chaos that followed humanity's departure, their first instinct was to resort to violence on a scale that humans had never considered. "Sir," Lieutenant Carter called out, "we're receiving a transmission from Council space. It's from Admiral Vextai of the Centaurian Fleet." "Put it through." The screen flickered, showing the insectoid form of Admiral Vextai. Rick had worked with him during the Proxima crisis 5 years ago. The alien's compound eyes looked tired, and his usually pristine uniform was scorched and dirty. "General Parker, I hope this message reaches you. The situation here has become impossible. My people are dying in a war that never should have started. The mediation protocols that Ambassador Johnson established are gone. No one remembers how to stop fighting once it begins." Rick felt a pang of sadness. Ambassador Johnson had been killed in a transport accident 6 months before the exile. Her replacement had never learned the delicate art of multi-species diplomacy that had kept the Altarians and Centaurians from each other's throats. "I am not asking for military intervention," the Admiral continued. "But if there is any way, your people could help us remember how to make peace. Many lives could be saved. We have forgotten how to be anything other than enemies." The transmission ended. Rick stared at the blank screen, thinking about all the work that humans had done to build bridges between species that had been fighting for centuries. Patience, diplomacy, cultural exchanges, trade agreements that benefited everyone. It had taken decades to create, and it was all falling apart in months. "What do we tell him?" asked Colonel Foster. Before Rick could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the command center. The tactical displays lit up with new warnings as sensors detected a massive fleet movement on the edge of human space. "Sir," shouted the sensor operator, "we have multiple fleets approaching the frontier border. Mixed composition, but they're flying Council enforcement flags." Rick's blood ran cold. "How many ships?" "At least 200, sir. It looks like they're massing for an invasion." The command center fell silent, except for the humming of computers and the distant alarms. Rick stared at the tactical display showing the approaching fleets. After a year of watching Council space tear itself apart, it looked like the chaos was finally coming for humanity. "Get me President Anderson," Rick ordered, "and start implementing Defense Plan 7. "Sir, are we at war?" asked Colonel Foster. Rick looked at the screen showing burning worlds, fleeing refugees, and approaching warships. "Colonel, I think we have been for a while. We just didn't know it yet." 2 years after humanity's exile, the Galactic Council faced complete collapse. President Paul Anderson stood in the Situation Room of the human frontier capital, surrounded by military advisors and intelligence officers who painted a picture of a galaxy burning itself to death. Half the Council member species were either at war, in open rebellion, or had simply stopped participating in galactic government. Fleet Admiral Tony Brooks entered the room carrying the most disturbing intelligence report yet. His weathered face showed the strain of watching former allies prepare for something unthinkable. "Mr. President, we just intercepted communications from the Council Emergency Directorate. They're planning something big." Paul looked up from the holographic display showing refugee movements across human space. Nearly 15 million displaced people now lived in frontier territories, fleeing the chaos that had consumed their homeworlds. "What kind of big, Admiral?" "An invasion, sir. They're calling it Operation Homecoming. The plan is to force humanity back into Council space and restore our previous role as peacekeepers and mediators." The room fell silent. Paul felt his stomach drop as he processed the implications. After 2 years of watching humans build a thriving civilization in the frontier, the Council wanted to drag them back to clean up the mess they had created. "How many ships?" asked General Parker. "Intelligence suggests at least 400 vessels from the remaining Council fleets. The Drakmari are providing the backbone of the force, with support from Zephyrian command ships and what's left of the Altarian Navy." Paul walked to the large window overlooking New Terra's capital. The city sparkled with lights from homes, businesses, and schools. Children played in parks while their parents worked in jobs they chose freely. Scientists pursued research without bureaucratic interference. Artists created without political censorship. It was everything the Council had prevented humanity from achieving. "They think we'll just roll over and come back," Paul said quietly. "They think our peaceful departure means we're weak." "The message they sent makes that clear," Admiral Brooks replied, handing over a data pad. "It's addressed to you personally, from the Emergency Directorate." Paul read the message aloud so everyone could hear the arrogance dripping from every word. "To the temporary government of the human frontier territories, the Galactic Council Emergency Directorate hereby orders the immediate return of all human personnel to Council space. Your unauthorized departure has destabilized galactic civilization and caused immeasurable suffering. You will resume your previous duties as peacekeepers, mediators, and support personnel. Compliance is not optional. Resistance will be met with appropriate force." Colonel Sarah Thompson, head of Frontier Intelligence, shook her head in disbelief. "They're blaming us for the chaos they created by kicking us out in the first place." "It gets worse," Admiral Brooks continued. "They're threatening our frontier colonies specifically. If we don't comply, they plan to occupy our worlds and forcibly relocate our population back to Council space." Paul felt anger rising in his chest. Humanity had left peacefully when ordered to go. They had built new lives without bothering anyone. They had even helped refugees from the chaos in Council space. And now the same people who had exiled them wanted to destroy everything they had built. "What about the species that asked for our help?" Paul asked. "The medical aid we've been providing, the refugee assistance?" "According to the Directorate, that's illegal interference in Council affairs," Admiral Brooks replied. "They want—" It stopped immediately. Dr. Helen Murphy spoke up from where she sat reviewing medical reports. "Mr. President, if we stop our aid programs, millions more people will die. The plague outbreaks alone will kill entire populations without our medical supplies and expertise." Paul knew she was right. Human medical teams had been working around the clock to help plague victims, even though the Council officially condemned their presence. Human engineers had been quietly repairing infrastructure damaged by the various wars. Human farmers had been shipping food to worlds facing starvation, all without any official recognition or thanks. "When do they plan to attack?" Paul asked. "Our best intelligence suggests they'll move within the month," General Parker replied. "They're positioning fleets at staging areas just outside our territorial boundaries." Paul studied the tactical displays showing the approaching threat. The numbers were daunting. Humanity's frontier fleet was maybe a quarter the size of what the Council was assembling. But Paul also knew something the Council had forgotten in their arrogance. "Admiral Brooks, remind me how many conflicts human peacekeepers resolved during our time in Council space." "Over 300 major disputes, sir, plus thousands of smaller," interventions, anti-piracy operations, and disaster relief missions. And in all that time, how many wars did we actually fight? Admiral Brooks smiled grimly. None, sir. We prevented wars. We didn't fight them. Exactly. The Council thinks our peaceful nature makes us weak. They've forgotten that we became peacekeepers not because we couldn't fight, but because we were too good at it. The truth was that humanity's military doctrine had evolved far beyond what the Council understood. Years of peacekeeping had taught human commanders how to end conflicts quickly and efficiently. They had studied every species' military tactics, learned their weaknesses, and developed strategies that could neutralize threats with minimal casualties. Captain Jake Morrison entered the room, now serving as head of Frontier Naval Intelligence. Mr. President, we've finished analyzing the Council fleet composition. They have a major problem, which is, they've never fought as a unified force without human coordination. Each species uses different communication protocols, different tactical doctrines, different strategic thinking. During our peacekeeping years, we served as the link that made joint operations possible. Paul nodded. He had seen this firsthand during his time as a diplomatic aide. Alien species that had been enemies for centuries couldn't effectively work together without human translators, mediators, and tactical coordinators. There's more, Captain Morrison continued. Intelligence suggests the various species in the invasion fleet don't even agree on objectives. The Drakmari want to completely conquer our territory. The Zephyrians just want us back in Council space. The remaining Altarians are only participating because they're desperate for help with their ongoing wars. A coalition held together by desperation and arrogance, observed Colonel Thompson. That's not a recipe for military success. Paul made his decision. Admiral Brooks, implement Defense Plan 7. I want every able-bodied citizen informed about the situation. This isn't just about our military. This is about protecting everything we've built here. Sir, are you sure about this? General Parker asked. We could try negotiating. Maybe find a compromise. Paul looked around the room at the people who had helped build humanity's new home. These were people who had believed in the dream of freedom, who had worked to create something better than the bureaucratic nightmare of Council space. General, what compromise could there be? They want to destroy our independence and drag us back to serve people who hate us. They want to take our children and put them back under the authority of species that consider humans inferior. They want to end everything we've built because they can't admit they were wrong. Dr. Murphy stood up, her expression determined. Mr. President, what about our humanitarian operations? The refugee camps, the medical aid, the disaster relief? Continue them, Paul replied without hesitation. Right up until the shooting starts. We won't abandon people who need help, even if their governments are trying to destroy us. Admiral Brooks activated the main communications array. Mr. President, we're receiving a direct transmission from the Council fleet. It's Admiral Crexton of the Drakmari Dominion. Put him through. The main screen flickered, showing the reptilian form of Admiral Crexton. His scales were polished to a military shine, and his yellow eyes held the cold confidence of someone who had never lost a battle. Human leader, he said in accented galactic standard. I am Admiral Crexton, commander of the Council Enforcement Fleet. You have 7 days to begin evacuation of your illegal colonies and return to Council space. This is your only warning, Eli. Stepped forward so the Drakmari could see him clearly. Admiral, humanity left Council space peacefully when ordered to do so. We have built our own civilization without threatening anyone. We have no intention of returning to serve people who consider us inferior. Crexton's lips pulled back in what might have been a smile, showing rows of sharp teeth. Then you will be removed by force. Do not mistake our previous tolerance for weakness, human. The Council has decided that your exile experiment ends now. And do not mistake our peaceful nature for surrender, Admiral. We left without fighting because we chose to. If you force us to fight, you will learn why the galaxy was so peaceful when we were keeping the peace. The transmission ended. Paul turned to his advisors, seeing determination mixed with worry on their faces. They all knew what was coming. After 2 years of watching Council space tear itself apart, the violence was finally coming for humanity. "Ladies and gentlemen," Paul said quietly, "prepare our people for war." The Council's invasion of human frontier space lasted exactly 72 hours. Admiral Kevin Hayes stood on the bridge of the UES Defender, watching the final Council ships retreat toward their own territory with their weapons disabled and their crews humbled. What the Council had expected to be a quick reconquest had turned into the most one-sided defeat in galactic military history. "Sir, the last of the Drakmari ships just crossed back into Council space," reported Captain Morrison from the tactical station. "All invasion forces have been neutralized or captured." Hayes nodded, feeling no satisfaction in the victory. He had hoped it wouldn't come to this. For 2 years, he had watched the galaxy tear itself apart, hoping the Council would realize their mistake before it was too late. Instead, they had chosen to threaten the very people who could have helped them. "Casualties?" he asked, though he already knew the answer would be minimal. 17 wounded on our side, none killed. Council. Forces have approximately 300 injured and 47 dead, mostly from accidents during their retreat. That was the difference between human military doctrine and everyone else's. Humans fought to win, not to kill. They disabled ships instead of destroying them. They captured crews instead of spacing them. They ended conflicts as quickly as possible, with the least amount of bloodshed. The Council had never understood this. They saw humanity's restraint as weakness, their mercy as softness. They had forgotten that the most dangerous predator was often the one that chose not to hunt. "What about the prisoners?" Hayes asked. "All treated according to the Geneva Conventions. Sir, medical care for the wounded, proper food for all species, and communication access to their home governments." Hayes had insisted on this from the beginning. Even though the Council had come to destroy everything humanity had built, human forces would treat their prisoners with dignity. It was what separated them from the barbarism that had consumed Council space. President Anderson's voice came through the communication system. "Admiral Hayes, please prepare a secure channel for transmission to the Council fleet commanders." "Yes, Mr. President." Within minutes, the main screen showed the detention facility where the captured Council officers were being held. Admiral Krexthon sat at a table with the other fleet commanders, all looking confused and defeated. None of them could understand how their overwhelming numerical advantage had turned into complete failure so quickly. "Admirals," President Anderson began, his voice calm but firm, "you came here to force my people back into servitude. You believed our peaceful nature made us weak. You thought our exile had made us desperate. You were wrong on all counts." Admiral Krexthon leaned forward, his reptilian features twisted with anger. "This changes nothing, human. The Council will send larger fleets. We will not stop until you return to your proper place." "Your proper place," Anderson repeated slowly. "Tell me, Admiral, how has the galaxy fared without us in our proper place?" The Drakmari Admiral fell silent. Everyone in the room knew the answer. In the 2 years since humanity's departure, the galaxy had descended into chaos. Wars that human peacekeepers had prevented for decades had erupted across dozens of systems. Trade routes that human patrols had protected were now hunting grounds for pirates. Diseases that human medical teams had contained now ravaged entire worlds. "We left peacefully when you demanded it," Anderson continued. "We built new lives when you abandoned us. We defended ourselves when you attacked us. Now you will leave our space and never return. Your arrogance has cost you everything we once freely gave." Admiral Vexatai of the Centauri Collective, his insectoid features showing exhaustion, spoke up quietly. "President Anderson, the situation in Council space has become impossible. My people are dying in wars that never should have started. Perhaps there could be some arrangement." No, Anderson replied firmly. We offered our help freely for over a century. You rejected it. You rejected us. You chose pride over peace, politics over people's lives. Now you must live with the consequences. Hayes watched the exchange with mixed feelings. Part of him wanted to help the species that were suffering because of their leaders' decisions. But humanity had learned a hard lesson about trying to help people who didn't want their assistance. The screen switched to show Captain Morrison escorting the council, officers back to their ships. Each vessel had been repaired just enough to make the journey home safely, but their weapons systems remained disabled. It would take weeks for council engineers to restore their military capabilities. Admiral, came a transmission from the frontier. Defense stations. We're detecting massive fleet movements throughout council space. It looks like several more species are declaring independence. Hayes pulled up the tactical display showing the galactic situation. The Council's failed invasion had been the final straw for many species. Seeing humanity successfully defend itself against overwhelming odds had inspired others to believe that freedom from Council rule was possible. How many? He asked. At least 20 species across 40 systems, sir. The Free Worlds Coalition has tripled in size overnight. The Tau Cetians are leading a general revolt in the outer sectors. Hayes shook his head. The galaxy was fracturing completely now. The Council's authority was crumbling, and there was nothing left to hold the remaining member species together. Within months, there might be no Galactic Council left at all. Dr. Helen Murphy entered the bridge with a data pad full of medical reports. Admiral, we're receiving hundreds of requests for humanitarian aid from Council space. Plague outbreaks, famine, refugee crises. The situation is getting worse by the day. Official requests? Hayes asked. No, sir. All through back channels. Individual doctors, planetary governors, refugee camp administrators. Nobody wants to officially ask for human help, but they're all desperate for it. Hayes understood the politics. Even in defeat, the Council couldn't admit they needed the people they had exiled. Pride was more important than the lives of their own citizens. What's our response? President Anderson has authorized limited humanitarian aid through private channels. Medical supplies, food shipments, refugee assistance, but no official involvement and no military support. It was the right decision, Hayes knew. Humanity could help individuals without getting pulled back into the political nightmare that had driven them to leave in the first place. A priority message appeared on Hayes's personal communication device. It was from Ambassador Claxtor, the Zephyrian who had led the campaign to exile humanity. Hayes almost deleted it without reading, but curiosity won out. The message was simple. We were wrong. We are sorry. Hayes stared at the words for a long moment, then showed them to President Anderson. The president read the message twice, then looked up at Hayes with a sad smile. Too little. Too late, Admiral. What should I tell him? Nothing. File it away and forget about it. We have more important things to worry about than the regrets of people who chose pride over peace. Hayes deleted the message and turned his attention back to the tactical displays. The galaxy was still burning, still tearing itself apart in the chaos that had followed humanity's departure. But the human frontier worlds were safe, prosperous, and free. Admiral, reported the communications officer, we're receiving a transmission from the Vegan government. They're requesting permission to establish formal diplomatic relations with the Human Frontier Republic. Approved, Hayes replied. The EAAI vegans had always been peaceful people, caught in the middle of conflicts they never wanted. They deserved better than the chaos-consuming council space. As the last council ships disappeared from human sensors, Hayes looked out at the stars that marked humanity's new home. They had built something good here, something worth defending. They had proven that freedom was possible, that species could govern themselves without the bureaucratic nightmare of the old council system. The galaxy had learned the price of arrogance. The Council had gotten exactly what they wanted. A galaxy without human interference. Now they would live with the consequences forever, while humanity continued building a better future among the stars. The great chamber buzzed with life from 1,000 different worlds. Strange creatures filled the curved seats that rose up like steps toward the ceiling. Some looked like giant insects with too many arms. Others floated in glass balls filled with colored gas. A few were made of living rock that moved and talked. At the very back, in the cheapest and worst seats, sat one human. Ambassador John Mitchell pulled at his black suit jacket and looked around the room. Every alien being in the chamber was older, smarter, and more powerful than anything Earth had ever seen. Their ships could cross the galaxy in days. Their weapons could destroy planets. Their technology was so advanced that humans barely understood how it worked. John had been coming to these meetings for 3 years now. 3 long years of being ignored, laughed at, and treated like a child who had wandered into a room full of adults. The other species, called Earth Sol 3, like humans, were too simple to deserve a real name for their home world. The High Counselor was a creature that looked like a praying mantis the size of a car. His name was something that sounded like wind, through trees, but the translation computers called him Zephyrian. He had been alive for over 200 years, and his people had been traveling between stars for 50,000 years. When he looked at John, it was like a professor looking at a student who could barely read. "The creature from Sol 3 wants to speak," Zephyrian said. His voice came through the translation machines with a tone that made it clear he thought this was funny. "The baby species wants to join the Defense Alliance." Laughter filled the chamber. It did not sound like human laughter. Some aliens made clicking noises. Others flashed different colors. The rock creatures rumbled like distant thunder. But John knew what it meant. They were all laughing at him and at humanity. John stood up slowly. His legs felt weak, but he made sure his voice was strong. "Honored Counselor, humanity asks to join the Galactic Defense Alliance. We want to help protect the galaxy. We want to work with you for peace." The laughter got louder. One of the floating gas creatures pulsed bright yellow, which the computers said meant it thought something was very funny. Another alien that looked like a tree made of crystal chimed like broken bells. "Little human," said another voice. This came from Thylax, a being made of pure energy that looked like a living star. "Your people have been in space for only 50 of your years. The youngest member of our alliance had been flying between worlds for 3,000 years before. We let them join. You still use fire to push your ships through space. What could you possibly give us?" John felt his face get hot, but he did not let his anger show. He had spent months studying reports about every species in this room. He knew their strengths, their fears, and their weaknesses. More importantly, he knew they had not bothered to learn anything real about humans. "We offer our knowledge and our friendship," John said. "We offer new ways of thinking and new ways of solving problems." This made them laugh even harder. A creature that looked like a giant octopus waved its arms in what its people used instead of laughing. "New ways of thinking," it said through the translator. "Young species always believe they have something special to offer. But there are no new ways. Everything has been tried. Everything has been done. You are children playing with toys while adults do the real work." The octopus creature was named Nexia and came from a world covered in deep oceans. Her people had built cities on the ocean floor and had been part of the galactic community for over 10,000 years. To her, humans were like fish that had just learned to swim. "Your ships are slow," said another alien voice. This one came from General Krex, who looked like a cross between a lizard and a bear. "Your weapons are weak. Your armor is made of simple metal. You have not even learned to bend space or control time. What wars have you won? What great enemies have you defeated?" John wanted to tell them about World War II and the defeat of fascism. He wanted to tell them about how humans had survived ice ages and plagues and disasters that would have killed weaker species. He wanted to explain that humans had climbed from caves to space in just a few thousand years, while most of these aliens had taken hundreds of thousands of years to do the same thing. But he said nothing. He had learned that these aliens did not want to hear about human achievements. They only saw what humans did not have compared to them. "Perhaps you should return to your small world," said Zephyrian. "Come back in a few thousand years when your species has grown up. The Defense Alliance is for civilizations that can actually defend something." More laughter, more flashing lights and clicking sounds and rumbling noises. John sat down and listened as the aliens began discussing real business. They talked about trade routes and mining rights and technology exchanges. They planned joint military exercises and shared scientific discoveries. They did all of this while completely ignoring the humans sitting in the back corner. But John Mitchell was not stupid, and he was not defeated. While the aliens talked and laughed, he was listening. He was learning. He was remembering every word, every number, every detail they shared about their ships and weapons and defenses. The aliens thought humans were primitive because human ships used chemical rockets. They did not know that human engineers had already figured out how to build the same exotic engines that powered alien vessels. They just had not built them yet because they were waiting for the right moment. The aliens thought humans were weak because Earth had no energy shields or planet-killing weapons. They did not know that human factories hidden in asteroid belts and on the dark side of the moon were already building things that would make alien weapons look like toys. Most importantly, the aliens thought they understood humans because they had seen human diplomats smile and nod and ask politely for acceptance into galactic society. They had no idea that every human smile hid the instincts of a species that had clawed its way to the top of the food chain on one of the most dangerous worlds in the galaxy. As the meeting dragged on for hours, John noticed something that made his stomach tight with worry. The aliens were scared. They tried to hide it behind their laughter and their arrogance, but he could see the fear in how they moved and spoke. Ships were disappearing on the edge of the galaxy. Entire star systems had gone dark. Something called the Devourers was moving again after being quiet for hundreds of years. The aliens had fought this enemy before and barely won. Now it was coming back, and it was stronger than ever. The Devourers were machines that ate everything. They turned planets into more machines, and more machines, and more machines. They learned from every battle and became harder to beat each time. The last war against them had cost billions of lives and destroyed entire civilizations. John listened as the aliens made their plans. They would use the same tactics they had always used. They would build bigger fleets and stronger weapons. They would form battle lines and fight the way their ancestors had fought for thousands of years. It was exactly what the Devourers would expect. It was exactly what would get them all killed. John smiled a small, quiet smile and began planning humanity's real introduction to galactic civilization.